is Choksring, and welcome to another English language episode of Londonney. Today, we are honored to have His Eminence Khöndung Asanga Vajra Sakya Rinpoche with us today. And Rinpoche, thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to begin with a short introduction of Rinpoche. So, His Eminence was born on 1st of May 1999 in Seattle, Washington, and to His Eminence Ani Vajra Sakya Rinpoche, who is the second son of the Pinso Porang family and Dhammo Chimila. His Eminence is actually one of the royal princes of Tibet, and so today we are going to learn more about the long and rich history of Sakya and his contribution to Tibet. So, Rinpoche, thank you. As I mentioned, you were born in the US, which is very different to many Tibetan Buddhism leaders because they're usually born in Tibet, India, and Nepal. So, how was your early life?
My early upbringing
Yes.
was quite religious focused.
Yes, I can imagine.
And
yeah.
so it made it very easy for me when I later moved to Asia.
Yeah.
Because I was already introduced to a lot of the Buddhist concepts and the Tibetan culture from a very young age. I was very early exposed to all of that. So it gave me a sense of deep appreciation for my heritage. Yes.
Right. And do you remember much of Seattle? Or?
Not quite. No.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Because you were very young when you left to Talam Monastery. Am I correct?
Yes, I was around. I was 5, but I turned 6 in a few days after I arrived.
Yeah. So that's very young. So, what was the education like at Talam Monastery, and who were your teachers?
At Talam Monastery, the education was more focused on the ritual aspects. So it concerns memorizing the scriptures, the prayers,
Right.
the rituals. So we have to do a lot of memorizing and then also know how to use the ritual instruments.
Right.
The ritual instruments and the hand movements.
So is that the doji?
Yes, the doji chibu, and along with that, later on, how to use the drum and
Right.
the romo and all of that. So it was quite fun, I would say. My years in Nepal are the years that I consider as some of the happiest moments of
Really?
my life. It was a very nice environment to grow up and to learn. And while I was in Nepal, as I mentioned earlier, I did not attend any school really.
Right.
So I did not. I missed out on the formal education
Yeah.
in a sense, but I was homeschooled.
Right. Right.
So
I see.
I did go through the class books.
Yeah.
And it was taught by English teachers. One notable one is Martha Ambrose.
Martha.
Yes, and then for my other teachers, the first teacher I had in Nepal is Ge Nimatsering. So he is a monk, a lama from Talam Monastery itself. Yes, and then eventually I had, as I moved on with my other studies, and certain teachers specialize in different prayers.
Yes.
So we keep on adding more teachers as I move along. So eventually there was, I had another teacher called again Guncho Namgyal. So he's from Tibet, and when he was my teacher, I was able to memorize the scriptures very effectively.
Oh, okay.
Because
so
he
he was
was
a good teacher.
quite a strict teacher. So I think I was doing my best when he was my teacher.
Right.
I was at my best. Yes, and also along with that, there was the traditional Tibetan discipline.
Right.
The discipline. But anyways, for me personally, it was very helpful. I think when I look back at it now, it really shaped
So
what I am into right now. it helped shape that. And later on, when I did the Vajrakilaya exam, and to prepare for that, I had another teacher from Sakya Center, whose name is Khön Sakya.
And how old were you when you had to prepare for that?
I was between 10 to 11.
Right, okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And what was your favorite class, if you had any, like, favorite class?
Well, before I mentioned that, I also studied a little bit of Mandarin
Oh, okay.
while I was in Nepal. So for that, I had also a teacher who's a monk called Gen Gongatsewang, also known as Lama Kesang.
Right, okay.
So yes, those were my main teachers in Nepal. And sorry, what was the question?
And did you have any class that you particularly enjoyed?
Enjoyed the most. I think it would be the ritual. The ritual classes. Especially, I think I enjoyed to prepare for the Vajrakilaya exam because you get to beat the drum.
Oh, okay.
It's like you chant with the rhythm, and it's very enjoyable. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And if we now try and focus on the Sakya lineage, the long and rich Sakya lineage. So you are a direct descendant of the Khön Sakya lineage, which actually dates back to 1073. So can you tell us about this Sakya lineage?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, the Sakya lineage has its roots in the Khön family. It is the Khön family that founded the tradition, but the Khön family is known as the family with three excellent names. In Tibetan, we call it Tsencho Sumdengi Donggu.
Okay.
So the first name is Vesalhai Donggu, which means the family of from the heaven of clear light. And then the second is this Timekhöngi Donggu, which is the stainless Khön family. And then the third is the Balden Sakya Donggu, which is the glorious Sakya family. So it's one family that has three names.
Okay.
And the reason why it has this three names is because it has an evolution. The family has an evolution, and in different stages it earned different names. And so it's called the celestial, the family from the heaven of clear light, because the original members of the family are believed to have been gods.
Oh,
In the heaven, when we speak of Buddhist cosmology, we speak of the three realms. The Kama Dhatu, the Rupa Dhatu, and the Arupa Dhatu, which would be translated as Dukam, Sukham, Sumekam, or desire realm, form realm, and formless realm.
Right, I see.
So we are living in the desire realm, according to mythology.
Okay.
But these gods come from the form realm. So from the heaven of form, there are many different stages, or dhyanas. And so one of the heavens is known as the heaven of clear light. So there are three brothers that left that heaven and visited Earth,
Right.
you would say, and particularly Tibet.
Oh, okay.
And so, in a sense, aliens. Yes. But anyways, many of them, after they arrived in Tibet, they returned. But one stayed back, whose name was Yuring.
Yuring.
Yes, the middle brother.
Okay.
The middle age. So he continued the family line.
Right, in Tibet.
In Tibet. And we do not have very clear dates, but we know for certain that this was before Buddhism entered Tibet.
Okay.
And so it would have been perhaps pre-6th century.
Pre-6th century,
Yes.
okay.
That would be safe to say. Yes. And then the first few members of the family are said to have lived in the sky or in the space. So they had visited Tibet, but as they were still celestials with heavenly power, they would not abide on the ground.
Right, right.
But anyways, after a few generations, there was a member and named Yapanke.
Yapanke.
Yes, and he had a clash or fought with the type of being called Simbo. in
Symbol.
Tibetan, or raksha.
Raksha. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes, sometimes, like in English, we don't really have an exact translation, but some translate it as vampire or ogre, but that's at least something close to it.
I guess Raksha is very different from vampire.
Quite different, actually, yes. So there's not really an English translation, accurate one that I can mention. But anyways, it's the Raksha class. So he killed one of the leaders of that race,
Oh, okay.
known as Simbu Gering Tame, which means bloodless dawn.
Bloodless Dawn.
So it sounds very legendary.
Yeah, it is very fascinating.
Yes.
Your whole
And
story.
then after killing him, he took his wife, so the Rakshasi, or the female,
Yeah.
whose name was Yadum Silima. And together they had a son called Khön Sakya.
Khön Sakya.
And that's from him the name Khön.
Right, right. So the first Khön.
Yes,
name.
and Khön could be translated as grudge, because Khön Sakya means born between a grudge. Born
Sakya.
between a grudge, which is between the gods and the Raksha class of beings.
Okay.
So he was a hybrid, basically. Yes.
Right.
Very mythological, of course.
Yeah.
But it is mentioned in most of the Tibetan history books. Yes.
Okay.
The historical records. And also, as well as in the fifth Dalai Lama's history of Tibet.
Right.
There's a whole chapter dedicated to all of these events. And from there on, the family came to be known as, it still retained its earlier name, but on top of that it became known as the Khön family. And although we don't exactly know, we can speculate that they were followers of the Pönbo tradition, because that was the only
That was a religion back then. Yeah.
available at the time.
Yeah.
Yes, but in our history records, we mentioned that from the very original family members, everyone was emanations of Manjushri. So that is it's an important concept, I guess you could say.
So we have, like, in Tibetan Buddhism, we have the emanation of various forms of Buddha.
For example, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is known as the emanation of Jeresik.
Yeah.
So in the Sakya family, generally we are known as the emanations of the three Buddhas, or the three Buddha families, but especially Manjushri.
Right,
And I will explain that in a while. And so for a while they were perhaps Pönbo followers. And then around the 8th century, which, as I also mentioned earlier, during the time of Khön Balpoche, who was the minister of King Chisong Detsen.
Yeah.
At that time, Buddhism was introduced into Tibet, and two brothers, Khön Nagendra Rakshita and Khön Doje Rinchen, became disciples of Guru Pema Sambhava. And from there on, the Khön family became followers or upholders of the ancient Nyingma tradition.
Right,
Because that was now the only Tibetan Buddhist school available at the time.
Because Nyingma is the oldest
As
Tibetan
it was
school.
the oldest, and the other new schools were yet to emerge.
Right, I see.
Yes. And then, so for a few centuries, they followed the Nyingma tradition and practiced the Yidam, which is Vajrakilaya. And through Vajrakilaya, they were able to attain the accomplishments of siddhis.
Right, okay.
And then it was in the 11th century, during the time of Khönsho Gyalpo, that he saw the need to form a new movement. Perhaps not maybe a tradition exactly in mind. The concept of school probably gradually emerged, not at the time, but at least he built the first Sakya monastery.
Right, so in the 11th century.
Yes, in the 11th century on the Panbori hill in Zang.
Okay.
So it's in central Tibet.
Central Tibet, yeah.
Yes, and the Sakya name comes from the land, because the land on which the monastery was built
Right.
is grayish, is a land of grayish color, so grey earth. Some translate it as white mountain.
Yeah.
Either one is fine,
Yeah.
actually. And so from there on, a more emphasis was put on the new tantras,
Yeah.
such as the practices related to the deity Hevajra. And later on as well, Chakrasamvara, Vajrayogini, and other deities of the new tantras. But for the family's personal practice, they continue to follow the Yidam Vajrakilaya, the old tradition. So it's quite unique because they formed a new tradition but did not leave behind their old roots, but found a way to practice both at the same time.
Right,
Yes.
right.
And so that was the case. And then Khön Gyalpo had a son who's very famously known as Sachen Kungwa Nyingbo. Yes, Sachen Kungwa Nyingbo. And he systemized the main practice of the Sakya tradition, known as the Lamde,
Lamde.
and the patent, its fruit. And his sons, he had several sons, but the most notable were Sonam Tsemo and Tapa Gyaltsen. And they further wrote commentaries and instructional manuals on the practices related to Vajra and other tantric deities.
Right.
And then Tapa Gyaltsen's nephew, Sakya Pendita, he was very famous because
I think
many
would know.
Tibetans remember him as the author of the Sakya lecture, perhaps.
Yeah.
And it's also that that was the time when the Mongol empire was at its height.
Yeah.
And Genghis Khan had conquered many areas of Eurasia. And Tibet was also one of the targets eventually. And this happened to be a time after the Tsembo dynasty. The family of King Sonsen Gampo, they had lost power to rule over Tibet, entire Tibet, entirely, because Tibet disintegrated after the rule of Langdalma.
Yeah.
Right.
So the last king.
So after that, the royal family did continue, but it became minor polities or principalities, occupying certain lands, but not entirely over Tibet. So it was basically known as the Silvitu, which is the age of fragmentation. Tibet was fragmented with no leader. It wasn't unified. So with that in mind, Tibet stood no chance against the Mongols. They could not put up a fight, and certainly many lives would be lost if they did. And so Sakya Pendita was invited to serve as the teacher of one of the Mongol princes, known as Khodan Khan, and or Khotan Ijen. And he negotiated. He helped negotiate and find a peaceful way for Tibet to not have to endure a forceful subjugation, I guess you would say. So what his plan was basically to spare Tibetans from unnecessary bloodshed. And that is reasonable because he was a Tibetan religious leader. It was for him to think of things, see things in that way, to take into account such considerations. So he did that, and that left his teachings left a great impact on the royal Mongol family. And later on, he left behind his nephew, Chogyal Papa, as his successor. And Kublai Khan took a great interest in Chogyal Papa and elevated him first as the national preceptor and eventually as the imperial preceptor
of the Mongolian Empire.
Of the Yuan dynasty. Because the Mongol Empire also, it itself kind of disintegrated into the Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, and then the Yuan dynasty and all that. So, anyways, the Yuan dynasty's capital, it had several capitals such as Shangdu or Xanadu, and also Dadu, which is the current day Beijing. Yes, and so the palace was situated there. And the imperial preceptor was required to reside at the palace in the Mento Rawa temple to serve as the teacher of the emperors. And the successive Khön members would initiate the successive Yuan emperors into the mandala of Vajra, to sort of legitimize their rule as a Chakravartin ruler
Right.
or wheel-turning monarch. And Chogyal Papa bestowed the He Vajra empowerment on Kublai Khan 3 times. And for one of the gifts out of gratitude was that Kublai Khan offered Tibet in return to Chogyal Papa, placing it in his care or in his hands. So the nature of that offering is disputed. Western scholars do argue that he did not completely offer Tibet, but Tibet remained as an autonomous, like a vassal state. Vassal state, but they had more freedom to make their own decisions. And so, anyways, so from Chogyal Papa, the Sakyas, for the first time after the fall of the Zembo or the Yalung dynasty, I guess you could say, Tibet was once again reunified under a singular authority.
Under the Sakya.
Under the Sakya rule. And this lasted for almost 100 years, nearly, around 90 years. And then eventually other powers, such as the Palmadrupa, came into the scene and came to rule Tibet. But the succeeding dynasties of Tibet still highly regarded the Khön family. So they did not really see them too much as a threat, I would say. In fact, many of the rulers, such as of the succeeding Palmadrupa dynasty, as well as the Tsangpa or the Rinpoche dynasty, were disciples of the Sakya family. And they supported the Sakya family and the tradition. And as I mentioned earlier, most of them looked up to the patron and priest and patron relationship as an excellent model to follow. And that also eventually became sort of the way for Tibet to keep communications with its neighbor, China, and also Mongolia. And it kind of highly influenced the course of history, the relations between those nations. Yes. And then eventually, of course, the final, you could say, dynasty or power that came into the scene was the Ganden-Pota of the Dalai Lamas. And so from that time, the Sakyas had always kept very good relations with all of the dynasties. And from the very time of the 5th Dalai Lama, we can see that from his biography, that when it came to performing prayers or ceremonies for the welfare of the entire Tibetan nation, the Sakya Lamas would be invited to Lhasa to perform those prayers. And
so it was regarded highly then.
Yes, it was regarded highly, and there are numerous mentions, repeated mentions in his autobiography. And after the Dalai Lama, apart from him, he gave the Sakya Lamas the highest status among the Tibetan Lamas at the time, which can be found in the volume 2 of his the Dalai Lama's autobiography. Yes, and so since that time until the current period, the Sakyas have been working very close with the Dalai Lama's government, which is the Ganden-Pota. Yes. And even when it came to when Tibet would go to war with other countries, such as Bhutan or neighboring countries, the mediator for the wars would always be the Sakya Lamas, because they were very diplomatic in their relations. And one example which we can see with our own eyes is the relationship between His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama and His Holiness the Sakya Teacher, the 41st Sakya Teacher. So I think this is quite evident. But it's not any new occurrence. My point is that there's a long history or background behind that.
So thank you for that very well-established account. And you've touched on the time when Sakya ruled over Tibet. So do we have any historical accounts on how Tibet was like then and how Sakya governed Tibet then?
Yes, many of the Tibetan accounts, actually you will find the mention of the Sakya's rule over Tibet in most of the Tibetan histories,
Right.
such as the Tepter Mapo, the Red Annals, and then also the Gyabe Yizang,
So,
the collection of Han and Tibetan records. And there's also the Yalungzhou Chenjung, the history of the Yalungzhou. And also the fifth Dalai Lama gives quite a lot of accounts. And he also states that for his own government, the Ganden Podang, the functioning of the government and the ranking or the roles which government officials play, it was modeled after the Sakya government.
So it took the inspiration then,
Yes, because the Sakyas had something called the 13 classifications. In short, in Tibetan we call it Sumtse Sum Da Ni Tse Ni. If you expand on it, it's called Sol Sim Che Sum, Cha Yig Zö Sum, Tam Den Den Sum, Kya Da Zo Ki, Shi. So like there's Sumtse Sum, three threes, and then Nizeni, two.
Right.
So anyways, different governmental posts, you could say. So I think many of the succeeding Tibetan dynasties follow that.
Right, okay, yeah. And so you've introduced us to the Sakya history, and I'm sure there will be many viewers who would like to explore more and learn more. So are there any books that are published in English that they could refer to?
There is a very recent translation on the, not of the entire Sakya genealogy, but 50% of volume 1 of the Sakya genealogy, written by Jamgon Ameshap, who was the 27th Sakya teacher, and who was a contemporary of the 5th Dalai Lama. The title should be The Amazing Treasury of the Sakya Lineage. So they may, anyone who is interested may search that up. And also there is a whole chapter dedicated to the Sakya family in the Tibetan history written by the 5th Dalai Lama, which is also translated into English. I don't exactly know how the title went, but the Song of the Cuckoo's Bird, Spring.
I think it sounds familiar, Cuckoo Bird or something,
Yes. They can find it in there as well.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. And now, next set of questions, I guess, will focus on your personal life. So, the Sakya order Sakya is one of the major schools in Tibetan Buddhism, and the title of Sakya Tenzin is given to the head of Sakya order, and you are going to be the 46th. Am I correct, Sakya Tenzin?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, how are you preparing for that?
There's a lot of preparations to do. First of all, I would like to touch that there are, as many will know, but also many might not know, that there are the different traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. They have different heads which are selected in different ways. And so, as we know, in the case of the Gelug tradition, the Ganden Chipa is typically a very learned monk. There is a saying that any child born who is who can make it with their studies can occupy the throne of Ganden. But we have not seen any layperson do that so far, or any female do that either. So it's all been monks so far that we know of. But anyways, it is through their own merit and education and qualifications. So in the case of the Sakya tradition, since it was founded from the very beginning by a clan or family, it has likewise been maintained by the same family and been flourished by the same family. And that is just how the system has remained. And even for the Kagyu tradition, I think initially Marpa Lotsawa. Kagyu tradition was in a way also founded by a layperson, which is Marpa, the great translator. And I think his plan might have been that for his son, Dharma Dode, to succeed him. But unfortunately, Dharma Dode passed away at a young age. And he was succeeded luckily by a great Tibetan master known by everyone as Milarepa. Yes. But eventually Milarepa had a disciple known as Lord Gambupa, or Dapulhaje. And from there on, the Vinaya was strongly emphasized. And so now if you look at the Kagyu tradition, most of the heads and the community is all pretty much strictly monastics. In the case of the Sakya tradition, the community of followers are mostly monastics. We have the ordination lineages coming from India to Tibet, but the tradition itself is maintained by the family. And so some members of the family may become monks, and then some members of the family choose to be lay tantric practitioners or machangs, such as in my case. And in my case, one of the responsibilities, apart from preserving the teachings, the lineages, is also preserving the family line. So I'm expected to marry and continue the family line in that sense. But that is one of the responsibilities. And but the main responsibility is to preserve the Sakya tradition, to make sure that it's going in the right track, moving forward. And luckily we have the elder generation from Tibet, such as His Holiness the Sakya Tijan, to guide us. And this is to our advantage. And also, of course, this is speaking particularly, but generally, of course, we have His Holiness the Dalai Lama as well. And this is great for us, because like even if we happen to maybe take a misstep, they can point it out to us. And so, and we still have time to learn from them. And so, in my case, for example, when I'm in the presence of His Holiness the Sakya Tijan, I try to take notes of whatever knowledge he imparts to me. And he often tells me a lot of stories from Sakya. And perhaps because he knows that I'm interested in that. But anyways, it's very, I feel very fortunate that I have this kind of access.
And do you go to him often to get guidance?
Yes, I do. If not personally, then virtually. Luckily, we have social media in this age. So in Tibet, we used to write letters, and it will take months and years for the receiver.
If the messenger survives.
And we don't know when the person will get it. But nowadays, you can send messages like within seconds. It's very convenient.
Sure. Okay. And am I right in saying that you're currently studying in the UK?
Yes, I'm currently studying in London, in the SOAS School of Oriental and African Studies.
And what are you studying?
I'm currently pursuing my MA in Buddhist Studies.
MA in Buddhist. And that's very interesting because we know you as an expert and expert in Buddhism and a Buddhist, like well-renowned Buddhist practitioner. So why did you think it was necessary to enroll in a Western university to study Buddhism?
My personal approach is to keep a balance between practice and, I guess you would perhaps call it academia. So I try to adapt the lessons and the scriptures into my own life. I'm not quite sure if I'm successful in that, or if I can call myself a very good Dharma practitioner in that sense, but I'm someone at least who tries. But I also like to learn a lot of things. And since the time of Sakya Pandita,
Yeah.
Sakyapas have been very into learning a lot of things.
So very inquisitive then.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Because we say that he really opened the door for the different, for the study of the different arts or sciences in Tibet, whether it be astrology or poetry or medicine or Buddhism and craftsmanship
Yeah.
and all of that. So I like to be exposed to a lot of arts, and so moving forward, I do hope that from my studies in SOAS, I will be able to know or to be endowed with the skills
Yeah.
to write academic works in English, and also along with that, maybe perhaps use some of those skills in my approach in the study of Tibetan scriptures as well.
And is that one of your aims to reach more global audience?
Yes, in a way. Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, and those were all my questions. So, Rinpoche, thank you for taking your time, and yeah, thank you for
Thank you.
coming here. Thank you.